Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our February Endo Educators. It's lovely to see some old and new faces, and I'm so excited to have the wonderful Kirsty Smith with us today, our second Endo Educator of 2023. So yeah, super excited to have you talking about a topic that I've been asked about a lot since I started the support group. So obviously with endometriosis, there's a lot of different things involved, but hormones is a big one that I think a lot of people have a lot of challenges with. And I think, frankly, just aren't really given that much information about what it actually means, what are the hormonal aspects involved, really just like any information around that kind of whole aspect of endometriosis. So I'm super excited to have you here. I know that, yeah, there's been a lot of excitement about this one. So yeah, I will hand it over to you and then we'll have a little Q&A at the end. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in, like either in the chat or unmute. Like, I want this to be a very safe, like open, supportive space. So this is for you, like to help you guys. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And if there is any questions jumping out, feel free, Becca, if you just want to tell me as we go, I'm happy to answer them as we go or leave them to the end. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here and into your community and to share this, as you've mentioned, like really, really empowering education that we really aren't given. So myself and Becca connected because we have a joint passion, a shared passion about helping women feel, the best version of themselves, whether that's energized, vibrant, and also providing knowledge and support to help women better understand their bodies and the empowering steps that they can take to, improve their hormone health, their overall health, and all of that good stuff. And let's be honest, there isn't very much support out there for hormone health. And in particularly, as I'm sure all of you here know and feel and have so much lived experience around, it's very frustrating to put it lightly, in terms of the support that we do get from our hormone health perspective, then even more so how frustrating the support we get when it comes to endometriosis. Like, you are all aware of like the shocking stats around it. So the goal of this session is to provide you with some empowering education and for you to walk away with some strategies and some steps that you can take today, tomorrow, whatever feels right. So I'm going to share like 5 key steps, but take what's meaningful for you in this moment. Don't feel like everything has to be done. This is just food for thought, food for discussion. So let's jump in with the agenda. So this pretty much sums it up, right? This is us leaving school with all the menstrual education that we were given. There was like zero empower. I did not feel particularly empowered about my health. So what we're going to cover here today is basically everything that you need to know about your menstrual cycle, really condensed, quick facts that we just need to remind ourselves of, and particularly around the hormones that govern it. I'm going to focus on the three main ones and the ones that are going to have an impact when it comes to endometriosis. We're going to look closely, like I've said, to the ones that impact endometriosis. We're going to look at how the hormones fluctuate throughout the cycle, how that might impact your experience of endometriosis symptoms. And then we're going to talk about the conventional medicine approach to treating endometriosis and its symptoms. And then we're going to look at the flip side, and I'm going to introduce you to functional medicine. So what's the functional medicine approach to endometriosis and how to manage symptoms? And this is where I'm going to leave you with some empowered steps that you can take and you can explore some more. So a little bit about me, who I am, what do I know about hormones? And I'm a functional medicine health coach. That's my training. And basically that means I help people get to the root cause of their symptoms and understand how to heal naturally. And as well as that, I'm a low tox certified coach, and I'll talk a little bit about what that actually means when we get to a couple of the steps a little bit later. But I'm also a creator of my online Hormone Harmony Academy, which is a transformational 3-month program which helps people get to experiencing a symptomless cycle so they can have consistent energy, better moods, less brain fog, and to have what I call a PMS-free life. And it is possible. So I'm passionate about getting empowering menstrual and hormone health education out there. And I work with individuals, but also working with employers, directly with employers, so we can have more impact, so we can get employers on board with the support that we need around our hormone health. So if anyone here works in an organization and would like this type of education in their organization, please reach out, because that is where the impact is going to come. And I know Becca is really passionate about this type of work as well. So if that's of interest, please get in touch. But I wasn't always this hormone health savvy. My backstory is, on my personal note, I retrained as a health coach because I suffered with a lot of hormonal symptoms in my late 20s. So I developed adult acne after never having acne in my teenage years. And this is literally the only photo that I ever had taken showing my acne. Like, I would filter the hell out of my photos. I just didn't really have many photos of me in that time. But alongside that, I was suffering with chronic fatigue, with brain fog. I had like zero sexual desire. And I was really frustrated with the conventional medicine approach to my symptoms. I was on hormonal birth control, tried a lot of different hormonal birth control. I was told that my test results came back as normal, when actually what I later found out is that I had a thyroid condition. So I was just really kind of disenchanted with conventional medicine. And when I was living in Australia, I learned all about functional medicine, and that there's kind of these two, you can have integrative medicine and you can have, the conventional medicine model, and they can work together really, really nicely. And this is where that sort of passion grew. And I retrained as a coach after working 10 years in the construction industry. So that's just a little bit of a background about me. But what we're here to talk about is your cycle and understanding, reconnecting to it. So we're just going to do a really quick overview of what's happening hormonally if you are cycling naturally. And what I mean by that is that we're not taking hormonal birth control, because that will impact the ebb and the flow of our natural hormones. So what I'm showing you here, and you might have already seen like very similar graphics to this kind of shows a typical 28-day cycle, but actually less than 13% of the population will have this type of cycle. So that is why I'm very passionate about reminding you that your experience of your cycle is unique to you. And obviously it can fluctuate in number of days. So really wanting you to think about connecting in and understanding what's normal, what's your normal range, and knowing when things are off kilter for you. So thinking about, we talk about it as the menstrual cycle. So that is really heavily focused on when we bleed. So obviously the first day of our period here, this dictates the start of the next cycle. But what we miss out when we talk about the menstrual cycle is that actually another really important thing is happening. And, a lot of the typical conversation around our cycle says that ovulation happens on day 14. Again, that is nonsense. It can happen on day 11. It can happen earlier. It can happen much later. So we want to figure out what's happening for us. So I'm going to start personally myself talking about our cycle as our ovulatory cycle, because without ovulation, we will not bleed. And I didn't know this for such a long time, because I was on hormonal birth control and I was like having, a withdrawal bleed, and I didn't really understand what was going on with my body. So really thinking about, am I ovulating? And that's kind of the impactful, that basically without that ovulation, we are not going to bleed, 13 to 16 days later. So really, really starting to focus on the importance of ovulation. And we're going to touch on more about what happens during ovulation and why it's important, because there is this beautiful cascade effect after ovulation that kind of happens that's really beneficial for our health. So let me know in the chat, in the comments, like, is this something that you're tracking currently? Are you tracking your period only, or are you also tracking the symptoms of ovulation? And if you want to know more about what those symptoms might be, obviously I can touch on that as well. But like my own personal experience, for a very long time, I only cared about the bleed and I did not care about ovulation. I didn't even know, to be honest, how to track it. Yeah. So Becca's saying no, because she's on the Mirena. So obviously that will suppress ovulation. But the longer you're on the Mirena coil, you can start to ovulate. Which I found really interesting. Yes, it doesn't mean that you can get pregnant. There's still the protection for pregnancy because of the synthetic progesterone that's then still released, but you can sometimes, especially the longer you've had the Mirena in, have experienced ovulation. So you might still notice some symptoms of ovulation coming back. So that might be interesting. Okay, so yeah, no bleed on birth control back to back, but I still ovulate on POP back to back, sorry. Okay, interesting. Tell me more about the symptoms of ovulation that you are experiencing. I'd love to know more about that. So thinking about like menstrual health, so our bleed and ovulation when we are cycling naturally is like our monthly report card, so to speak. So, thinking about it, sometimes it's like inconvenient, but it is kind of giving us an indicator that, things are ticking along nicely with our health. So now let's dive into some of those key hormones that we're going to talk about a little bit more. So estrogen here is the one that kind of reigns over the first half of our cycle, so that follicular phase. But estrogen is there the whole time. As you can kind of see, it is still there in our second phase, our luteal phase, but it really should be standing down in that second phase. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but like estrogen is kind of like that diva hormone. So, she kind of makes us feel confident, sexy, having that good skin and hair days, feeling like really great socializer. When we feel like we're on top of our to-do list, like that is estrogen. That's kind of what she does. And there are high levels of estrogen receptors in areas of the brain. So this is like, when I talk about hormone health, I get really excited because we have like receptor sites on the brain, like they are everywhere. It's not just like this impact that's having with our ovaries, like it is, it's everywhere. Okay, I'd love to understand about tracking whilst on any type of birth control. Maybe you're skipping ahead. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, definitely keep that one to the end. We can touch on that for sure. So, estrogen, for instance, like it raises neurotransmitter levels, including dopamine. So that, that's why we feel more motivated. We feel that we have better attention span. And, and there's also things, supportive around like serotonin. So really supportive for mood. We might feel in a better mood generally in the first half of our cycle. And it is a hormone that's predominantly secreted by the ovaries. But like I said, there are many estrogen receptor sites in many cells of the body. And I really want you to remember that because it's going to become a lot clearer as to why estrogen can become problematic because there are so many receptor sites in the body. And I'm going to talk about, I was going to give a sneak peek of what I'm going to talk about later, but we're going to touch on more about estrogen receptor sites. So let me know if you can relate to any of these, whether it's now, whether it's in the past, because we are going to talk more about estrogen dominance. And it can be an excess of our natural estrogen, but more and more, which is becoming more prevalent, is synthetic estrogen in our environment. And this is where we are going to focus our time today. So if anybody relates to any of this, these are some of the most common signs of estrogen dominance. Okay. So let me know if anybody can relate, whether now or in the past, but it's good to know just kind of the symptoms that some of them, very relatable. And some of these are quite common, like PMS symptoms that kind of get categorized as well. So let's continue on our journey of the hormones, and we're going to talk about testosterone next. So a lot of people are like, well, this is just a male hormone, right? It's only important for men. But no, it's not. It's really important for us women. And the interesting fact actually is that women and men, we do actually share a lot of the same hormone. It's just their function and how much they're secreted in the body is slightly different. But testosterone is known as a group of like androgen hormones. But thinking about it as like, you know, being active, competitive, like sexy, strong, one of those type of hormones really kind of gives us that boost, a little bit of oomph. And it really raises before, whenever you ovulate, because it's making us interested in having sex, right? The body wants you to procreate, whether you want to or not. That's what its function is. So when things are ticking along nicely, you know, we should have a good sort of level of sexual desire. And, you know, that was one of my symptoms. That was like my canary in the coal mine. I was literally like, I'm in my mid-20s. Why have I just got zero desire for anything? So thinking about, you know, these little things that are happening in your body as just your body going, you know, just sending you a text message being like, hey, something just needs a little bit of attention. But really important to know about testosterone. And again, ovulation, like when we are ovulating, this symphony of hormones is sort of created, and it's really important for like muscle and bone density. And bone density becomes very, very important as we age. So we want to know that we're having all of these hormones to protect us from things like osteoporosis. You know, women are particularly more prone to like heart disease in the future. So all of these hormones really have such a positive impact on all aspects of our health. But if anybody here has ever heard of polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, or has maybe thought in the past that maybe they have some symptoms of it, that's where PCOS and the androgens are very closely connected. So when we have excess like acne, like excess hair in places that we wouldn't normally have hair, that's because we have an excess of androgens, and why it's really important that that's tested as a diagnostic for PCOS. That's just a bit of a side note. And then the final one we're going to talk about today is progesterone. So let me continue on with that. So progesterone really is the hormone that really should be dominating the second half of our cycle. So in that luteal phase, and she is our cool, calm, and collected hormone. You know, she is the one that should be helping us with mood, helping us with sleep, and all those kinds of things. And basically what happens, like this is probably one of the most like fascinating things in biology. I don't know if anybody here listens to the Huberman Lab podcast. They are like insane podcasts, like 2-3 hours. But he's a man from like, he's a researcher at Stanford University. And hearing him talk about this process was just incredible. He was getting so excited about it. And basically what's happening is that after ovulation, there's a follicle that bursts and releases the egg. So then this follicle and this motion of what's happening then turns into its own organ. So we have things going on in our body that are able to turn into their own organs. It's insane. And that's called the corpus luteum, and it starts to produce progesterone. So there's this incredible thing that's happening internally. And progesterone is so super important for a number of crucial processes in terms of, you know, it's known as progesterone, which is like the progestation hormone. So obviously it's the one that's like creating a plush lining for the egg if it's fertilized, but it's also there to kind of help regulate our mood, help regulate our sleep. So then it's no wonder that when we have low progesterone symptoms, this is where we have things like anxiety, maybe other mood disorders, like having trouble sleeping, all of these types of things, you know, spotting, short cycles. This is all to do with progesterone. So if any of these kind of relate as well, just know that this is, you know, this is a symptom. This is a sign, a signal from the body. Yes, currently, sorry, Giovanna says, strong PCOS here, currently proudly supporting a full moustache and beard. So glad that you're sharing that and that you're here. And I hope some of what we're sharing here as well is going to be helpful for you. So thank you for being so open to sharing what you're going through. Thank you so much. So let me know if like low progesterone symptoms, if anybody can relate to any of that. But yeah, just wanted to emphasize the importance of like our ovulatory cycle and the hormones that are released because of that. So how does all of this relate to endo and endometriosis? Like, so, you know, I'm sure most of you are aware, and I might be repeating some of the information that you already know, but endometriosis is not like any other sort of period problem. So it's not necessarily like a hormonal condition like PMS and PCOS, which we've identified as androgens. It's affected by hormones. So, you know, let's explore that a little bit more. Like what hormones are having an impact on endometriosis? So it's strongly, estrogen in particular, strongly stimulates endometriosis lesions, and high estrogen production is consistently observed endocrine feature of endometriosis. And we have like different types of estrogen. So the particular one that we're talking about with endometriosis is estradiol. So that's the type of estrogen. And that is key hormone for the growth and persistence of embryotonic tissue, as well as the inflammation of the pain associated with it. So, and this is why, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this is why switching off estrogen is kind of the standard conventional medicine approach. But as you can kind of identify now through the benefits of our natural estrogen, you know, that brings with it some of its own issues as well when we suppress our natural hormones and natural functions. So then on the flip side of that, because we're talking about endometriosis, you know, the lesions are actually resistant, the endometriosis lesions are actually resistant to progesterone because they have fewer progesterone receptors than normal endometrial tissue. So one of several ways in which endometriosis lesions are not, so that's one of the several reasons, sorry, that endometriosis lesions are not the same as normal endometrial tissue. So why progesterone resistance is problematic is, as I've identified, like the impacts that progesterone has on the body, and it should slow down the growth of lesions. And progesterone has an anti-inflammatory property, so that helps with pain. So when we have tissues that are resistant to it, we're not able to get those benefits of progesterone. So that is just a little quick overview. So when might such issues arise? There is a time in our cycle where, you know, estrogen should decline and progesterone should rise, but it might not happen that way. So let me know, because I don't have a personal experience with endometriosis. I work with clients that do. Is this something that you would identify with, that certain symptoms, like maybe the pain, will be worse in certain phases during your menstrual cycle if you are, you know, menstruating naturally, or even with the Mirena coil? Are there particular times that you have identified that your symptoms feel worse, that the pain is worse, that there's radiation of the pain? Let me know, because most people that I work with will typically have an exacerbation of symptoms kind of that 10 to 14 days before their period is about to start. So if that resonates at all, please let me know. So, you know, whilst we've identified that whilst hormonal imbalance is not necessarily the root cause of endometriosis, it does exacerbate symptoms, and it will, you know, with excess or unopposed estrogen, you know, in other words, hormonal balance can make it worse, but it doesn't cause it. So I just want to make that really clear. But in terms of when we think about addressing the experiences that we're having with endometriosis, looking at hormonal imbalance is really important. So you are going to walk away with some strategies around dealing with hormonal imbalance. So I'm just going to read some of these. Yes and no, trying to track to figure it out, but sometimes it's it's just every day. Yeah. Stress, definitely. Notice around supposed ovulation, but then also random. Yeah, okay. So Britt, yes, it used to be for me, my symptoms would increase intensity during that stage of my cycle. Yeah. And obviously, if we are taking hormonal birth control and if estrogen is suppressed, then knowing, following this particular rhythm is not going to be as clear cut as Beck has kind of already identified. When we don't know how our natural hormones are cycling, because we are having the conventional route of suppressing key hormones, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for us to identify. So Jovina's saying most pain when bleeding, spotting or menstrual, also during ovulation, but also kind of all the time. Yeah, and as can be the case, right, with endometriosis, it can just be consistent pain as well, can't it? So if it's not our hormones, and this might have been covered by other topics here, but from what I understand from Becca, we haven't kind of looked a lot in this group around maybe what are some of the other approaches in terms of functional medicine. So I just wanted to cover what, kind of bringing into balance why certain strategies that I talk about at the end might help. Okay, so I just wanted to cover it, but I'm apologizing in advance if you have already sort of covered this. But really interesting, estrogen and progesterone also affect our immune system and vice versa. Our immune system and our hormones have this really intricate, delicate relationship. So for example, as I've kind of touched on, estrogen is actually more of a pro-inflammation hormone. It actually promotes inflammation, whereas progesterone is generally more of an anti-inflammatory, so it reduces inflammation in the body. And there's a lot of research now recently that's been conducted that endometriosis has almost half of the hallmarks of an autoimmune disease. So I don't know if this has been covered previously, but there's that really strong connection with endometriosis and the immune system. Okay, so in general, other autoimmune conditions, I always get such a dry throat, so sorry if I've got to pause for a drink. Other autoimmune conditions that we might have heard of are things like celiac, so a really severe gluten intolerance, and things like rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease. So there's a number of similarities between endometriosis and some of those conditions. So what is kind of being said in kind of this new research that's coming out is that this means that there's definitely a connection between endometriosis, overall inflammation in the body, and immune system dysfunction. But what we're noticing is that kind of the general medical consensus, so when we're talking about conventional medicine, hasn't really caught up with this new way of thinking about endometriosis and this sort of immune dysfunction. So hormonal suppression does still remain the primary sort of treatment. So kind of talking about that a little bit more, and you guys are probably more aware of, you've had the lived experience of this, but the conventional medicine approach for endometriosis at the minute is obviously the surgical excision of the lesions, and which has been identified as a bit of the gold standard, for both pain and fertility. And then we have, the hormonal suppression with birth control. And even in places like America, there are even stronger drugs around this, things like Lupron, which isn't used here in the UK, and I don't think in Europe, but in the States, there are even stronger drugs than, the birth control that we have here. And that really works by shutting down ovulation and including estrogen deficiency. So estrogen deficiency slows down the growth of the lesions. Oh, I'm so sorry. But it does not cure endometriosis, as we know. But it might then have many effects, including, depression and issues with bone density and bone loss, because as I wanted to kind of touch on at the beginning, is that our natural hormones have so many important impacts, okay? And then we have like hormonal IUDs or IUSs, which Becca has already identified, like the Mirena coil. So that works locally to suppress the uterine lining and the endometriosis lesions. And it's kind of probably more the preferable treatment to other methods of hormonal birth control, because it doesn't always shut down ovulation or cause estrogen deficiency. But again, there are always other factors to consider with this method as well. So what I really want to focus on from here on is the functional medicine approach to endometriosis. And the reason I love it and the reason that it works is because it focuses on improving our immune function and to reduce inflammation. And inflammation is connected to our gut function, our liver health, and our liver's ability to detox effectively is really important, because our liver is the one that will detox excess estrogen from our bodies. And it has a really important role to play in overall, helping like autoimmunity and all of that sort of stuff as well. And this approach with the gut, the liver, all of these things, focus on all of these things, is really going to help with estrogen dominance. So instead of just suppressing the hormones and kind of like having that sort of like band-aid approach, it's really trying to address the root cause of some of these things that can exacerbate our experience of endometriosis. So I just want to make it clear that, whilst what I'm suggesting here is going to have a positive impact on its own, sometimes they're not enough. And it might need to be, done in conjunction with, surgery and all of that good stuff as well. So whilst they help, again, what we know is that there is, at this moment in time, no cure for endometriosis. So it's kind of like taking that different pronged approach to help the different aspects. So I really want you to walk away with like some of these top tips. But again, like I really do want to stress that working with a skilled excision surgeon, to remove the endometrial lesions and scar tissue is obviously a really important factor. And obviously I'm not an expert here about surgery or hormonal suppression, okay? If you were wanting to talk more and understand more about the various hormonal suppression and the impacts that they have, definitely would recommend working with your doctor and a gynecologist. And obviously there's awesome resources out there around all of these things as well. But what I am an expert in and what I'm very passionate about is those sustainable lifestyle interventions that can really help manage endometriosis. And this is part of this, well-rounded approach to, living with endometriosis. So, the goal really is to try and mitigate the symptoms by supporting the immune system so it can work properly. And then we're addressing inflammation. We're looking at ways to support the body to detox. So that's looking at, supporting the detox systems, but also minimizing the toxins that we put in the first place. So these are my 5 top tips in terms of the functional medicine approach to endometriosis. They really are going to be like a quick run through of them. So there's going to be loads of resources that Rebecca's going to share after around this. And please, please, please reach out to me after this session with any follow-up questions. So the first is prioritize your gut health. And why? Because if endo is connected to our immune function, the gut basically regulates 70 to 80% of the immune system. And it also influences things like blood sugar. And what you're going to learn in a second about blood sugar is that that's really important to bring down inflammation. And when we're suffering with endometriosis, there's a lot of pain, and pain is associated with inflammation. So anything that's going to bring down inflammation is going to be great here. So we really want to have like healthy bacteria in the gut. because it protects us from infection, it regulates our metabolism, good digestion, and again, home to a number of those immune cells. So now I hope you can kind of better understand that, you know, when the gut is disrupted, it's going to have an impact on a number of these things. Yes, so Beck's on it with her probiotics, and we're going to talk about some things that are going to help as well. And really interestingly is that when we have like a disturbed gut microbiota, so the bacteria that's in the gut, you know, things that are normally processed in the gut is going to be impacted. So things like immune system, we talked about our brain function. So this is why, and I find this really fascinating, that, you know, sometimes we can develop allergies, food intolerances that were not there previously. My own personal experience with my gut health is that it really affects my skin. So if my skin flares up, I know my gut bacteria is off. But also things like mood, and, you know, it's very closely linked to thyroid. So, you know, that is also my experience with hypothyroidism. And it really is closely related to autoimmune conditions as well. And on top of that, if we've got a nice healthy gut, when our gut is working optimally, it minimizes the reabsorption of estrogen in the body. So we want to support our gut health, because that basically means that we are removing excess estrogen through our poops and when we go to the toilet, when we have a wee. So ideally, we want to be having 1 to 3 poops a day. So let's talk poop. Like, we are here, like, this is open. Like, let me know, is that your experience right now? Would you say you have at least 1 poop a day? And if not, I'm going to give you some strategies, but this is strategies for everyone. But I would really, really be focusing on gut health if I was not pooping every single day. And even if you just think about it in the way of, yeah, that recycling of estrogen in the body. Yes, had acne for so long, so connected. No, I'd break up for weeks. Awesome. So yeah, if anybody wants to share any poop stories, please feel free. So some quick wins when it comes to, you know, our gut bacteria. Considering a stool test. Like, I don't know if anybody's watched the program Know Your Shit on Channel 4. It's making having your stool tested, like, it's bringing it to the masses, and I'm so here for it. And there's a number of different stool tests you can do, and then you can work with a practitioner to understand the makeup of your own bacteria. Is so freaking exciting. And then you can normally use herbs to get that gut bacteria back into balance. But I just wanted to show you some of the bacteria that they found that are more common in those that suffer with endometriosis. And, you know, you really want to see if that is something that's in your gut and how to deal with that. So that's really what I would say. If you're interested in doing that, get in touch with me. I can share with you some resources around it. And also, in terms of investment purposes, working with a practitioner that's like not going to break the bank, because, you know, I know it can sometimes be you know, cost prohibitive, because it's not always something that will be tested through the NHS. So as some of you have already mentioned, like, if we're not pooping every day, but we want to help with that, prioritizing getting enough fiber. So 25 grams a day. If you're not really sure where your fiber intake is lying, I use an app called Chronometer. Just track for a couple of days just to see where you lie with that. And then if you need to up it, then you need to up it. And I'm going to share with you some of my favorite gut loving foods. But, you know, nobody wants to hear this, myself included, but sometimes we also need to minimize foods that are just not great for the gut. And that includes refined sugar, alcohol, and gluten. Like, they are very tricky on the gut from 2 perspectives, in that they change the makeup of the gut bacteria, but they also make the junction in the gut leaky. So it goes from being a nice tight juncture to then being open and leaky. So we don't want to do that. So if we can bring down those foods. And I think on one of the calls, I don't know if it was Giovanna that was here, mentioned about like doing a bit of a reset, like an elimination diet, bringing down certain foods for a period of time, so you can identify which foods that you have sensitivities to. So that was really a strategy that I did, and I employ it with most of my clients. I take them through it for 30 days just so you can start to see some of your most common symptoms fall away. And then you can slowly reintroduce some foods to see if you genuinely have a sensitivity to them. So yeah, if you want to take a quick screenshot, please feel free. This is like my gut loving food list. So screenshot it. If you use it on, please tag me on social media. I'd love to see you doing it. But there's a number of ways that we can take a bit of a two-pronged approach when it comes to fiber. So get some of these in your diet. We've got the insoluble fiber, soluble fiber, resistant starch. So start eating. I know this is like, people are like, I'm not sure. Unripe bananas, so good for your gut bacteria. Cooked in, I know I can see back, I'm like, oh, put it in a smoothie. You won't know. It's so good. And if you make potatoes or rice, always make enough for the following day, keep it in the fridge, and then that develops this beautiful resistant starch, which feeds the good bacteria. I'm going to move fast because I know we want to leave some time for some questions. So supporting your detox pathway. So that is really focusing on our liver health. So things like cruciferous veggies, trying to get a good few of those in your diet. And then I'm such a big fan of herbal teas. And I did a post about this on social media. So really getting herbal teas into your day. And some really great liver loving ones are like things like nettle, dandelion root, anise and fennel, and also milk thistle, like really, really good. So just thinking about ways that we can support the detoxification. So giving our little liver, because sometimes we're not so kind to it, giving that some support to do what it needs to do best. And interestingly about estrogen detox, I just wanted to put this here because sometimes it can feel like when we go to the doctor, we are banging our heads against a brick wall to try and get any sort of testing done. But there is another test, and yes, you would have to pay privately. If you're in the States or Canada, it would be covered sometimes with private medical, but getting a Dutch test done, and it's really super insightful. And Dutch is just dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. And you can do this working with a practitioner. It costs a couple of £100, but you can really understand how your body detoxes estrogen, and there's a number of pathways to detox estrogen, and you can see which one of yours is sluggish, and then you can get a really tailored approach to it. Like, I'm a big fan when we can, and I know that cost can kind of get in our way sometimes, but when we can, get in individualized test results, so then we know where we need to focus our attention. So again, reach out to me. I work directly with a functional medicine practitioner who offers like one-off sessions to do the tests and read them for you. So please reach out to me if that's something of interest. Now, I'm putting this one in here, but I know that it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming when we talk about synthetic estrogen in our environment. And this is why I became a low tox certified coach, because I was so really, really angry about the synthetic hormones or the synthetic chemicals in our environment that has a direct impact on our hormones. And a lot of that has to do with estrogen. And that's because of these fake estrogens, so synthetic estrogens in our environment. So a key strategy to think of when we're trying to minimize the amount of synthetic hormones coming into the body is thinking of ditching plastic containers, because they contain a chemical called BPA. And that is a known endocrine disruptor. So really swapping to kind of like metal containers, storing our food in different types of containers. And definitely if you reheat food in like plastic in the microwave, definitely just stop doing that and put it into like ceramic or into glass, because that's going to have such a positive impact on the symptoms of estrogen dominance. And there are amazing studies that show if we put these strategies into place, the impact will reduce by about like 30-40% over a couple of days. So the impact, we can start putting these strategies into place and see benefits like really quickly. And then the other one to think about is ditching synthetic fragrances, okay? And they're prolific. They are everywhere. So really support brands that are really transparent with their ingredients, and they asterisk like that their fragrances are from essential oils. I've got an ebook with loads of information about trusted brands, and please reach out to me on social media if you want to know, hey, is this brand clean? Is this a good one? Because I've done so much research on it. So yeah, I know that can kind of be a bit of a intimidating one. And then finally, thinking about balancing our blood sugar. And this is somewhere that I start every one of my clients, because when we stabilize our blood sugar, it's going to minimize inflammation. When we minimize inflammation, we have a positive impact on pain. But as well as that, that's going to have, balancing our blood sugar has a positive cascade effect on other hormonal symptoms. But mainly, I say to my clients, if you can put the strategy, which I'm going to share on the next slide, into place within 7 to 10 days, you're going to have more energy, less brain fog, and better mood, okay? And this is the strategy. So again, if you want to screenshot it, please do. Starting your day with a glass of hot water. You know, you can either use apple cider vinegar, which is great for our gut health, or just a squeeze of lemon or lime. Even though they're acidic, they're actually alkalizing to the body. Eating breakfast within 90 minutes of waking. So if you were like me, in the past, I used to intermittently fast. I was living on coffee, and I wondered why I had terrible energy in the afternoon. And we really want to focus on eating protein with our breakfast, things like eggs, salmon, yogurt, and maybe adding some protein powder or collagen powder, depending what you like. And then always make sure that we're doing that. Hydrate, fuel, so have your breakfast, then have your caffeinated drink, because that's going to really have a positive impact on your energy later in the day as well. I'm really thinking about not leaving it too long between meals. So like every 3 to 4 hours, either having your next meal or like a substantial snack to kind of keep this balance. We don't want to be like riding this roller coaster of like the highs and lows. And yeah, protein, especially breakfast and lunch and snack, that's definitely where most women I know, we don't have enough protein. So really focusing on that. And yeah, having those 3 solid meals a day. So if you don't already, definitely follow the Glucose Goddess on Instagram. She is incredible and she shares the most amazing hacks, and she's written an amazing book. But similar, she shares like these types of hacks, like eating different foods in different orders. She's a big fan of apple cider vinegar and the positive impact that that has. So be sure to check her out. And I did also just want to cover supplements, okay? And again, coming back to, if you haven't had your vitamin and minerals tested in a while, you can get this done by the NHS, by the doctor. You just have to maybe pester them a little bit. But we're looking for key minerals to consider, you know, when those are suffering with endometriosis. You know, a vitamin D deficiency or zinc is very common. And again, we want to have our own data, so then we know what we need to supplement with, because I need to have information before I kind of stay with a supplement regime. Otherwise, I'll take one for a little bit and then I'll drop off it. But aside of that, there's other things that we can do in our diet. So focusing on like wild caught fish, so things like mackerel, salmon, sardines. And if we can't get that in our diet, thinking about a really high quality fish oil supplement, because again, that is really anti-inflammatory. So again, when we have less inflammation, less pain. And then thinking about getting more iodine into the diet. There's been some really interesting studies about iodine and the positive impact that has on people with endometriosis. And the way that I like to get iodine into my diet is you can buy these little packets of like sea vegetables. So kelp, dulse, things like that, and just sprinkle them in salads, on soups, on your eggs, things like that. And then there's been some amazing research on curcumin. So like really high power curcumin, whether that's in a paste or in a capsule. So that is the end of my tips. And like I said, I've got an ebook, and I will also share with Becca in the follow-up, kind of like a bit of a supplement guide that I created for those with endometriosis. So you can have that as a follow-up. But yeah, any questions, comments, please let me know.
Woo! Bravo. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Kirsty. I have a few questions, but I'll open it up to you guys. If there's anyone on the line, if you want to unmute, or if you want to put it in the chat, you guys can go first. Otherwise, I will jump in. But yeah, this was super interesting, and I feel like it's given me a lot of food for thought. No pun intended.
Yeah. And Giovanna's had a question here saying about iodine making Hashimoto's worse, which is an autoimmune condition. Yes, those with a thyroid condition, you do want to have some caution around iodine. So again, that really comes down to if you know that you have that type of condition, making sure that you have your levels checked. And that's why I'm saying get it through your diet and not supplement with iodine. You know, the amount of iodine that you can get through other vegetables and eating them, they have like a synergistic relationships. We actually want to eat them with different things so they can have the most benefit, instead of actually taking like high potency iodine supplements, which I would only ever recommend that you do based on like your own information and you know that's the way that you need to go. But if you are specifically interested in like the research around iodine and endometriosis, let me know and I can provide that as well. I can provide links to any of this sort of research that if you want to dive deep into any of it.
Beautiful. Any other questions from anyone? I'll ask mine and maybe it'll inspire something. So I was curious what you said about, so I don't eat breakfast, like I haven't done for like since I was maybe went to school. So I'm very used to like, I'll wake up, I'll have a coffee and then I'll eat lunch like quite late. So I guess that's like not intentional, but I guess that's kind of fasting, right? Or like intermittent fasting or something. So like I'll usually have lunch at like 2 or 2:30. I've started trying to like, I'm trying to track my pain more so and trying to like figure out what my triggers are, because at the moment it just seems like it's stress. But like I'm trying to like get a little bit more clarity because it's like kind of hard to just manage stress. And I started noticing maybe like for this morning, for example, I didn't have any pain this morning, and then it started getting to like around lunchtime. Then I was thinking, have you ever seen any information or data around like the correlation between that and pain? So like you mentioned like inflammation and I guess energy, but like not, I almost like don't really care about I seem to not, I get an energy slump in the afternoon, but it's like I can sort of go through and I almost don't need, I feel like I don't need it in the morning. I'm just like going, but then I start getting pain around like early afternoon. So I don't know if that's like, do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of hard to understand what, but if I was just curious if that
I have one theory, and I think it makes sense because of what you're saying around how stress impacts you and how you notice that correlation between your pain and stress.
Yeah.
And basically, in the most basic term, if we think about fasting as a stressor on the body, now this is another like mind blown moment for me, that there are a number of things that we do in our life that are a stressor on the body. And I'm not saying that all stress is bad. Like we do need an element of due stress. And there's a reason that cortisol is there. You know, it pumps out like inflammatory response, but then it also pumps out things that clean up the inflammation. But when we are constantly fasting, so you're regularly fasting, your body, when we're dealing with hormonal symptoms, isn't feeling safe. So when the body doesn't feel safe, it pumps out a lot of cortisol. So essentially, you not waking feeling hungry and going through to 2:30 in the afternoon to function and to get you through the day, your body's going, I need to release cortisol, I need to release cortisol, this is how we're going to get through this is how we're going to get through. So you are inadvertently creating more inflammation.
Sure.
Because that we don't have that management of blood sugar either. So I would, and this is where I start with all of my clients, is definitely a strategy is to eat something within 90 minutes of waking up. And if you don't feel hungry in the morning, we have to train the body to be hungry again, because we actually want to wake up feeling hungry. But that's a good sign from the body that the metabolism is working, that everything is firing as it should be. And it's really counterintuitive to what kind of diet culture has told us and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of the studies that have been done, positive studies that have been done on intermittent fasting, have been done on men. There's not been really that many positive ones on menstruating women. It can be very positive post-menopause, but if we're dealing with a hormonal imbalances, hormonal issues, I would definitely experiment on yourself and try it for a few, a week or so, and see if you notice improvements with that pain that you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It's funny though, because there's other things like being on Zoom calls now, like it's like clockwork. Like this morning I had no Zoom calls, and then since I've had meetings this afternoon, I get pain. So I think that's just like not necessarily to do with this, but I think it's always helpful just to hear these kind of things, because then it's like, oh, okay, maybe that's actually because, I don't know, virtual meetings maybe just cause me. Do you know what I mean? It's like trying to figure out through these kind of sessions, like what works for one person is going to be very different to another person. So
definitely. And like, this is the strategy that I encourage all of my clients to think about, is like, you've got to try a few things for yourself, and you've got to be a bit patient to see what results you're going to get. Because yes, we all are bio-individual, but there are key strategies that we really probably should all employ, but see what feedback you get from your own body.
Yeah. I know we've got 2 minutes left. My other question, which I don't know if you can answer super quick, is just around the tracking on the Mirena. I hadn't heard of that, and that was actually one of the instigators behind doing this session from the community as well, because a lot of people with endo are told, like, just take hormonal contraception, and so then it's like, okay, well, what if I want to try and explore that? So is there like a definitive time, or like how do you know that that's an option for you, if you know what I mean? Like at what point, or do you have to, is it if you experience like breakthrough bleeding, like, do you know what I mean? Like, how do I know if I could do that or not?
Yeah, so interestingly, and this is what I found out as part of my program, I had a fertility awareness instructor come on and talk about the symptoms of ovulation. And what you're probably unlikely to experience on the Mirena coil is like the different type of ovulation fluid, because it's the estrogen that creates the cervical fluid or mucus, discharge, however you've referred to it. We might have some discharge, but it's not a signal of ovulation, because the estrogen is what basically dictates that. And then in terms of what's happening with the IUD or the Mirena, the IUS, is obviously you're having that low level of progestin. So that's kind of switching off the progesterone. So what might be worthwhile doing as an indicator to see if you are experiencing changes that come with ovulation is regularly taking your basal body temperature. So, and what will happen when we take our basal body temperature is we will see an increase in our temperature by about 0.2 degrees over a course of 3 days, and it continues to rise. So that would be the symptom of ovulation that you could potentially expect to see on the Mirena coil.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if there's any other questions. I know some people had to jump, but I'll send a follow-up email with all of your details, Kirsty. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I've personally learned a lot. I hope that you guys have learned a lot. And yeah, just thank you for like taking your time, you, Kirsty, but also you guys like coming and, you know, educating yourself and trying to find solutions, because essentially, you know, that's where we're at the moment. And yeah, I just actually posted, for those of you who aren't aware, I think some of you already are, because I know we've got a few familiar faces, but if you're not, if you're in London on the 11th of March, we're going to be doing our first inaugural This Independent Life conference, and it's all on the future of endometriosis. So again, I know we've run out of time, but I posted the link there. I'll include it anyway. But yeah, it's really a space for the community in person. So it's basically taking endo educators up a notch, and it'll be this, but like loads more, with like loads of different people on loads of different topics. So yeah, if you guys are free, it would be amazing to see you there. But yeah, if I don't see you there, and otherwise, have a lovely evening, everyone. Thank you again, Kirsty. And yeah, if anyone has any questions as well, like, please let me know. And obviously, like with Kirsty as well, I'll include all of her contact details and things. So if you do want to follow up about working with her, or if you just want to check out what both of us are doing, please do. But yeah, we are here. And yeah, it was lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you. Bye, Em.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.